Здравствуйте, moi дорогие друзья, and welcome to my YouTube show. So if you didn't know what I said, hello, my dear friends. So, which is in Russian, if you translate it from Russian into English. So anyway, this topic's video is going to be on what was KGB. So KGB was a kind of like the Russian version of the CIA or FBI, like checking up on people and like spying on the Western countries like United States or whatever to see if they were not planning any, see if they were behaving and not planning anything against U.S.S.R. or whatever. So that's what basically KGB was. It was kind of like a police force in Soviet Union during that time, a police agency. So it was established in 1954, so that meant that was 65 years ago. It was established in Moscow, and its headquarters is at the Lubyanka Square, I think. That was the government building. That was the headquarters of KGB, basically, which is in Moscow. And so, and then also KGB was also known for hunting down people to see if they were making sure if they were going to work or whatever, because if people did not go to work, they would get arrested and they would be sentenced. They would be thrown into jail for up to 3 years. And so if they didn't go to work without any good reason, they would get arrested and they would be sent. They would get arrested and they'll be thrown into prison up to 3 years, which happened under the rule of Comrade Andropov. Comrade Andropov, he was a former chairman of KGB from 1967 all the way to 1982. So he was chairman of that organization for about 15 years. And so during when he was KGB chairman of the KGB or chief of the KGB during the rule of Brezhnev, when Brezhnev was leader of U.S.S.R. for 18 years, almost 20 years, from 1982 to from 1964 to 1982. And then also before Andropov took power as leader of the Soviet Union, the people were not being forced to go to work during that time. When Brezhnev was in power, it was kind of relaxed during the Brezhnev era when he was leader of the nation. And so and then during the near the end of his rule by 1979, the last years of his rule as leader of the Soviet Union, he invaded the Afghanistan in December of 1979, before Christmas of 1979 began. And so that was almost 40 years ago. Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And then that led to a corruption going on in the U.S.S.R. And that became known as economic stagnation, or the Brezhnev stagnation. And that was when the economy stopped moving, basically. And they were not making food, and there was no food on the shelves in the supermarkets if you went there during that time. And then there was a corruption going on in the political system, in Soviet political system throughout the country during that period. And so that made people very angry because there was no food on the shelves throughout the supermarkets during that time. And they were mad at Soviet government during that period. And they were upset at them, at government officials. And then on the television, that they were basically like brainwashing people, saying like there's food on the shelves. There was food on the shelves. There's drinks on the shelves. But in reality, there were no. If you went to the supermarkets, there was no food. There was no drinks or anything. There was basically like brainwashing people. So under the Andropov time, he wanted to solve corruption. He wanted to fix corruption in the Soviet political system, when he took power following the death of Brezhnev on November 10th, 1982, and he was elected the General Secretary of Communist Party of Soviet Union 2 days after the death of Comrade Brezhnev. And so that time, the people at work were not doing that well because they did not show to work, which started on which occurred many times during the Brezhnev rule. When Brezhnev was leader, people didn't have to go to work, and so when Andropov came power, he started to make quite a few changes. And so he made laws saying if people did not go to work without any good reason, if they didn't go to work or college without any good reason, they would get arrested and they would be sentenced to prison for up to 3 years. And so that was like the horrifying thing in Soviet Union. You had to go to work or you would be arrested. And that was the horrifying thing in that time, in that country. That was quite scary. And that was kind of like another Stalin was in power. Andropov was kind of like another Stalin when he came power because he wanted to be strict. He was strict on people, kind of like Joseph Stalin was during his rule from 1924 to 1953, which was basically almost 30 years. So anyway, after the death of Yuri Andropov, it was Konstantin Chernenko. And during the Chernenko time, it was kind of relaxed, like nothing happened, like people were not being arrested like under the Brezhnev rule when Brezhnev was leader. It kind of returned to the quiet time because people were not being arrested under the Brezhnev or Chernenko time. When Chernenko took power in 1984, people were not being arrested under the Chernenko when Chernenko took power as leader of the Soviet Union. And then also, I think there would be also some KGB security whenever a leader went to go to a factory or something like that to give a speech there, like Khrushchev or whatever, or another Soviet leader or whatever, another Soviet leader. There would be some KGB security, I think, like whenever the General Secretary of Communist Party or General Secretar SKKPSS or Generalny Secretar SKKPSS would be ever giving a speech there, there would be some KGB security, basically. And so, and then also they would also be listening to the phone, whatever you're saying on the phone or whatever. They would be listening to whatever you're saying if you were not talking bad about the leaders or whatever, or government officials. And so you were not allowed to joke about leaders during that time, or you would be arrested, I think, too. You would be arrested for speaking things bad about the leaders. And also, same in public. If you were speaking anything bad about the leaders in the public, you would get arrested and you would be and you would be thrown into jail in that country. So that was like one of the horrifying things about KGB in that country. And then they would also listen to whatever you're saying on the phone or whatever you are recording or something. Kind of like the FBI and the CIA, basically. And so KGB lasted for almost 40 years. So it lasted from 1950 through 1954 all the way to 1991, same year when U.S.S.R. dissolved during that time. And so right now they don't have KGB. It's another police force they have in the country in Russia right now. I don't know the name of it though, so. And then also another interesting fact that I remember listening to one of the history lectures or the great courses was I remember they were talking about this one time, I think it was in the Ponston meeting. That was the meeting between Joseph Stalin, who was the chairman of the Communist Party of the U.S.S.R., and it was between Harry Truman, who was the president of the United States, and it was also the British Prime Minister, Naval Chamberlain, I think. I think that was his name. There was a meeting, and I think it was Truman and Stalin. They were talking about the atomic bomb, about like and then Truman said to the Stalin, he said to him, "Do you know about the atomic bomb?" And then Stalin replied, he says, "Yes, we know about the atomic bomb." So it's kind of an interesting fact, because maybe like some KGB guys were probably spying on the Manhattan Project or something like that, and they probably knew about the atomic bomb. So that's kind of like another interesting fact that I remember from listening to one of the history lectures on this. It was this DVD, CD I was listening to on this computer. So that was another interesting fact. And then KGB also stands for Комитет государственной безопасности, which means the Committee for State Security. So that was kind of like a police force in the country during that time in the country. Oh, and then I also remember from a reading this article, I think it was on Khrushchev or something, and then I remember he recorded his stories about like he was fighting in World War II, and then or in this about his life or whatever, and then the KGB heard him recording his stories, and then they took some of his tapes away when he was recording his stories about like what he did. So I hope you enjoyed this video. So please drop a like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video of history of Soviet Union or other history videos.